Chapter 261 of Jujutsu Kaisen. This chapter has brought us a lot of few things to question in the coming weeks given this little break we're on, as well as revealing to the audience the truth behind Gojo's return, or his apparent return. This video is going to be my overall thoughts and predictions for this chapter and the next respectively, and beyond this point the video is not going to be as edited as highly as my vids usually are, but you can keep looking at this Gojo, Yuta, Guta animation I made in the background. So I'm going to talk about the events of this chapter in the order in which they actually occur, page by page, and discuss their implications across the entire series, as a lot of this chapter gives some depth to things that are kind of hidden unless you double back and look again. So obviously the chapter starts off just where we finished off in the previous 260, with Yuji raging over Choso's death. This doesn't last very long, even though Yuji vows to destroy Sukuna's heart, just like he did at the end of the previous. We don't get much of a chance to dwell on that, as we get the nice little close-up of Gojo. He's returned! Psych! It's Kenjaku, because of the stitches on his forehead. Psych again! As stated by Sukuna, this is actually Yuta Okotsu. And as you can actually see on this page here, this seems like a little bit of foreshadowing. It seems that Yuji has been knocked away, so chances are both Yuji and Todo are going to kind of stay out of this fight, so they can stay out of the range of the incoming domain clash we see at the end of the chapter. And given Todo's new efficiency with Boogie Woogie, they'll probably just get out of range of the domain with crows like we saw before. Now, the rest of this chapter is majorly flashbacks and exposition, which is part of the course with Gege, because if we ever see these dreaded black boxes around the panels, chances are it's a flashback, and they're never really short. It basically just boils down into the Anti-Sukuna squad just going through a potential backup plan of a backup plan of a backup plan of a backup plan, right? And just stating that after Yuta kills Kenjaku, Rika can eat Kenjaku, copy Kenjaku's curse technique of hopping across corpses, and if everything goes wrong and Gojo loses, Yuta can take over Gojo's corpse. One annoying thing here, which is also pretty cool, is that Kusakabe kind of seems a bit off here, because he just says, why doesn't Yuta copy the Limitless from Gojo? To which Shoko recounts, he can't without the 6 eyes, it'd be useless. To which Kusakabe says, why not copy the 6 eyes? And Shoko replies that it's a physical attribute and not a curse technique, which seems weird to me because earlier on during the commentary during the Shinjuku Showdown, Kusakabe had like a really good in-depth knowledge of the Limitless, which makes it seem really weird that he doesn't know the correlation between the 6 eyes and the Limitless curse technique. This feels really weird to me, this dialogue, but the visuals are actually really cool, because if we look at Kusakabe, obvious Kusakabe bias and fan here, he's actually doing something that's kind of neat, because if you look at the fan book, it says that the reason that Kusakabe sucks on lollipops all the time is because he stopped smoking, and as we see in this little cute interaction, he declines a smoke from Shoko, and she'll end up smoking the entire pack anyway, as she absolutely starts herself during the Sukuna and Gojo fight, right? And this page itself finishes off with Maki wondering what the hell will happen after 5 minutes are up and Rika demanifests. Meme then provides us with 3 possible options. Option 1, he dies quickly. Option 2, he dies slowly. Option 3, he's stuck as Gojo. None of these options are particularly great, right? Ideally, because even Yuta himself states that he doesn't know what the hell would happen. But to be honest, I feel like it's possible for a 4th option, because as we see during the Kenjaku fight, that Kenjaku has the ability to use CTs from previous host. Like we saw him use the anti-gravity curse technique he stole from Kaori Itadori, aka Yuji's mom. Which means maybe, hypothetically, in the perfect scenario, if you are the ultimate Yuta stan, if Yuta keeps the ability to copy curse techniques from his old body, he may be able to keep the ability to transport corpses again, so he might be able to transport back into his own corpse. And if he does that, he might also be able to keep the Limitless. This is a very specific best case scenario, and I very much doubt it, given the tonality and theme of this entire interaction and dialogue, but you gotta hold hope if you're a Yuta fan right now. Yuta stocks are up, don't get me wrong, but his chances of living ironically are going down with it. And as Meme discusses these possible options and people trying to figure out what would actually happen, Maki states that, you know, a lot of people aren't kind of into this idea, especially, you know, Kusakabe, saying that we have to worry about Yuta, like what happens to him as a person, to which Yuta then, you know, declines and says, you know, Jojo, I'll reject my humanity and become a monster. If Gojo's willing to become a monster, protect all of us and fight the King of Curses. I mean, we're fighting the strongest sorcerer in history of all time. Jesus, it's Ryoma Sukuna. We have to go all out. He says, you know, he'll go out. He'll take up the mantle. He'll become a monster. There's a couple of different translations, but, you know, we get this solid translation through a lot of them being, you know, if he's not going to become a monster, then I will, which is a very interesting dynamic for Yuta to evolve into, almost calling back to his conversation with Ryu and Uro, where the both of them say that his kindness will kind of get him killed in the end. You know, it's weak for a sorcerer be altruistic. It's not, you gain nothing from that. So if he becomes a monster, as he vows he does here, he'll keep everyone safe. Which makes me think Yuta will probably die at the hand of Sukuna and not at the hands of the curse technique itself. I say this because since Uro specifically says it's people with a strong sense of self who are the strongest, and they give the example of Sukuna, and in this scenario Yuta is literally giving up his sense of self, he's becoming someone else. I feel that Yuta in the coming like 3 chapters maybe will probably get like his own Kashimo type dialogue with Sukuna where he ends up dying at his hand, not after the 5 minutes are up. For him to just die after the 5 minutes are up seems very pointless and redundant. Like it would be much more fun to read a fight of maybe Sukuna going all out, which he apparently wasn't doing against Gojo, but who knows. Anyway, we then get to see Yuta ask for permission to violate a corpse, and surprisingly enough, Gojo doesn't really care. He's fine with it, because if he's the strongest, if he loses, you know, he's worthless. It doesn't matter. His corpse is just a pile of meat. He doesn't really care. And the panel accompanying this, to the left of it, has got a lot of heated debate around it, which is really stupid. So Gojo says what pisses him off is that Shoko doesn't really care about what happens to his corpse. And I've seen a lot of people misinterpret this, right? That Shoko doesn't give a rat's ass about Gojo. She doesn't care, blah, blah, blah. Which is just completely, you know, unfounded and dumb to say, right? Just look at her during the showdown in Shinjuku against Sukuna. She is smoking an entire pack to herself. She's stressed. Of course she's worried about Gojo. We had the full hidden inventory arc. The hidden inventory arc showed to the rest of the world, not just the audience, that Gojo is the strongest sorcerer around. You could argue before his interaction with Toji that it might have been Yuki or whatever, but after him, you know, unlocking RCT, purple, red, etc., he was the strongest sorcerer, right? And Shoko herself saw the effects of Gojo being the strongest, undoubtedly, and seeing what that did to Geto. And that has kind of, you know, hardened the fact in her head that Gojo must be the strongest. And as a result, she cannot see Gojo ever losing. He can't. He's the strongest. If he's not the strongest, you know, is everything from, like, the hidden inventory a lie? Like, I mean, it's probably not that deep, but it's also not as blatant as it's portrayed. Or as blatant as people are interpreting it. Obviously, she gives a rat's ass. You fucking, if you've read the manga, you know she does. Obviously, right? This single panel has been misinterpreted to tedium. It's so strange. You have to really get nothing but a denotation from this speech bubble to get that kind of interpretation. It's goofy. It's just people have tunnel vision and don't realize how far back this flashback is, right? Just like the audience a lot of us couldn't see Gojo losing, right? We didn't even see it as a possibility. So sure, she'll let Yuta have this backup plan of taking Gojo's corpse just in case. It's almost like an empty promise to him. She saw Gojo as the strongest, and she saw the effects it had on the world as well as Geto specifically, right? So if you take this panel hyper literally, you're a fucking goober, bro. Then we get to a more literal callback to Uro, where we talk about, you know, callback to specifically JJK0, where Gojo mentions that both him and Yuta are related, saying they're part of similar clans, the Fujiwara and the Sugawara, right? Then we get a kind of another calling back to what Gojo says really, really early on in the series, saying that there are people who will surpass his level, like will surpass special grade, and we see Yuta, and it kind of gets, you know, explained a little bit more here, where he says that Yuta may be blessed even more than him, and it'd be pretty lame if he didn't take advantage of it. And if you look at the stats and compare him to Gojo, like, you could argue that yes, Yuta is more blessed than Gojo in the sense of raw talent. I mean, look at Yuta. After like a couple months of training, he manages to take down one of the only 4 special grades in the entire world, including him, with months of training. Yes, Riku, like, he had Rika on his side, but like, dude, this is like baby Yuta, and he's already got RCT that he can heal other people with, and he hits a black flash here. Like, he is a mega prodigy. When you compare him to like this Yuta and this Gojo will have had a significantly, like, he's born and bred to be the perfect, you know, Jujutsu sorcerer from birth. This Yuta didn't even know Jujutsu existed till a couple months ago, yet he's still taking out special grade sorcerers. So you can clearly see that, you know, Gojo isn't exactly wrong here when he says Yuta might have been just born more blessed. Then we get Gojo saying that everyone can head back now. Oh, if you look in the background of this scene as well, this is around the area where all the higher-ups get murked. And we find out from this scene that it was pretty much just Gojo that did it, as Yuta, Maki, Panda, and Inumaki just kind of wait outside. He also states that if everything kind of goes wrong, Gakuganji will be in charge, which is still weird to me because the strongest we've seen Gakuganji is Yaga level, and yes, they're grade 1s, and that, like, Kusakabe is still stated to be the strongest grade 1. The title of grade 1 is kind of tenuous at this point, given that Todo is on the battlefield kicking Sukuna in the face, and he's also a grade 1. Like, either way, Gakuganji is very contentious, especially at this point. Saying that Gakuganji will effectively be in charge is crazy. Maybe it just means about, you know, Jujutsu Society, but whatever. To be honest, this is like just more a little bit of world building, to be honest. This is like the least interesting stuff in the chapter, but there is still stuff to take from it, like Yuta asking Gojo not to bear the burden of being a monster on his own, right? Gojo going into this room, killing all the higher-ups, killing more people, and kind of condemning himself a little bit more, becoming more and more of a monster. And as he does so, he thinks about Geto. So, you know, Gojo, Geto shippers are eating good, I guess. This is the best flashback you've had in forever. And then for some reason, out of nowhere, we get a bit of an Amai reveal, and we find out that his curse technique is the ability to convert, manifest, and like do stuff with the own sugar in his body, which I imagine a couple of people probably predicted, given the fact that his name is Amai, which literally means sweet, and that makes sense. And he can also hypothetically transfer it to others, which, you know, gets him all happy because he gets to be on the medical team and help out a bit. Then we flash forward to just a couple, I want to say like 8 chapters before, to just around the Yuta domain clash, where he is hit with a world-cutting slash. And boom, we see Yuta kind of just on the edge here. Oh, fuck, what's that character's name again? I've completely forgotten. His CT, like, painkiller, stop wounds, I forget, god damn it. We then cut to the operation table, which is where we get a little bit more exposition here. We also see that Yuta moved his wedding ring from Rika to his right hand, which is very intriguing because I'll get to that later. Then we cut to the domain clash, the big ending of the chapter. Since Yuta here is using Unlimited Void, it gives the possibility that this is a bit of a weird one. If you think back to the Kenjaku fight with Yuki in Tengen's domain, and, you know, wherever that was, I forget on the top of my head. He uses his own domain, which I also forget the name of because it's a really long title domain. Since after using Kenjaku's curse technique, Yuta is able to use Gojo's domain expansion, it means that perhaps the domain used by Kenjaku was Geto's domain expansion. That is a possibility, but I disagree with that interpretation. I agree that it would technically be a domain expansion possibly created from Geto's curse technique, but given the fact that, you know, Kenjaku is barrier god, you know, #1 expert, it would make sense that the domain expansion he made from that curse technique would be one he made himself. Since we saw Geto fighting Yuta without a domain expansion, because, you know, the concepts didn't really exist yet, but even still, it's fair to say that, you know, JJK0 Geto didn't have a domain expansion, but even if he did, this would be the domain he would have. But I don't think Geto, when we see him, had this domain. I think Kenjaku developed curse spirit manipulation to have this domain expansion, if it even is from curse spirit manipulation. But, you know, you never know. Now, one other thing. Some people think from during the moment in Shibuya where Geto kind of reacts to Gojo and grabs himself by the neck, some people think that Gojo will somehow, in some way, revive himself through Yuta's body and come back. No, that's not happening. Gege himself said that's not going to happen. There's a question from the fan book where Gege is asked, Pseudo Geto's arm was moving during the Shibuya incident, but how much of Geto's consciousness remains in the body? The answer being not much. He was moving like how a dragonfly whose neck was torn off can move. So it's more like instinct than, you know, it's kinesthesis, it's muscle memory, it's not actual, you know, consciousness. Granted, he does say not much, but sure, I highly doubt Gojo is going to be revived through Yuta's curse technique. I do not see that at all. That would completely neutralize the whole point of Yuta possibly sacrificing, well, definitely sacrificing himself to fight Sukuna. I don't think that would happen. I think that would make Yuta's death redundant and make Gojo's death fall flat. So I doubt that's going to happen. If you're holding out for Gojo to come back, don't. Just trust me, don't. Give up. I'm sorry. But yeah, There is one last thing I want to mention. I noticed this when I was going through the chapter earlier, that it's mentioned that Yuta moves his ring to his right hand, which is strange, because when we see Gojo do his domain expansion, well, Yuta, Guta, whatever you want to call him, when he does his domain expansion, he uses his right hand to activate it, right? And in the next panel, we see his right hand as well. And in both of these shots, we don't see his left hand. Now, that means Yuta's primary hand to have his wedding ring on is his left hand, as we see whenever he uses his domain or manifest Rika, right? He usually has his wedding ring on his left hand. So it is possible that the wedding ring is on Gojo's body's left hand, and Rika is like, well, we know Rika is manifested, and chances are she might show up next chapter to fight Sukuna alongside Gojo. I don't know what the hell she'd do in a domain clash, to be honest, because she'd have to remain in contact with Gojo, but since the curse technique relates to Yuta, I don't know if it, I don't know. We'll just have to find out next chapter with that. There's not much else to say. This chapter has brought a lot of hype along with it, and it got a lot of Gojo fans both hype and miserable. I can understand why. I'm sorry, but your king isn't coming back. I know Kusakabe will. We all know that. Dude's chilling. But Gojo's dead. We had like 10 chapters of straight fighting and commentary. For him to come back now would just... It would sour it. It would be like the same thing as when, like, you know, Naruto revives Might Guy after he uses the 8 gates. It makes the sacrifice redundant, and you know, we don't want that. That would be pointless. That would be stupid, you know. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the chapter. I hope you liked the little animation in the background. Let me know if you like these kinds of videos, and yeah, doodles my doodles. Hope I see you in the next one.